I had a gut feeling my spouse was gearing up to end our marriage, so I quietly safeguarded my wealth. 2 weeks later, he initiated divorce proceedings, only to retract when his scheme unraveled. Hi everyone. Before we dive into today's story, I need your support for real. We've noticed a dip in the channel's momentum, and hitting that subscribe button is one of the easiest ways to help us keep going. It's free, it takes a second, and it tells YouTube, yes, more of this. If these slow burn, twisty, emotional stories have ever kept you company on a late night, I'd love for you to be part of this community. All right, let's get into it. I've been lurking in these forums for years. The kind of person who reads other people's disasters like a cautionary tale and thinks, that could never be me. But life doesn't ask permission before it flips the table. To be clear, I'm not the type who jumps to wild conclusions. I'm not the woman who sees a missed call and starts building conspiracy boards on the kitchen wall. I'm practical. I'm careful. I'm the friend who talks other people down. Which is why it messed with my head when my instincts started screaming and my logic kept whispering, you're overreacting. My name is Avery Collins. I'm 34. And my boyfriend, technically my husband on paper, even though we still called each other boyfriend and girlfriend out of habit, was Ethan. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 4, and for most of that time we were that couple. The couple people side-eyed at dinners because we had our own little language. Private jokes, stupid faces across the table, that effortless rhythm where you don't even have to ask what the other person wants. Ethan would plan these thoughtful date nights like he was staging a movie scene. Reservations, playlists, a little candle he'd pretend was for ambiance, but really he just liked watching me smile. And I'd do the small things back. His favorite takeout after a brutal week, a surprise coffee on Monday mornings, the exact socks he liked folded on top of the laundry so he'd actually put them away. It felt natural, like we'd cracked the code. So when things shifted, it didn't come with fireworks. It came like fog. About 6 months ago, the change started. Subtle enough that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But once you notice fog, you can't unsee how everything looks. Softer, farther away, less real. The first thing was his phone. Ethan used to leave it everywhere. On the counter, on the couch, face up on the dining table while he showered. We had that lazy kind of trust where if a notification popped up, neither of us flinched. Then one week, his phone became attached to him. Bathroom, phone in pocket. Taking out the trash, phone in hand. Even doing dishes, he'd prop it against a cup like it was a co-host in our kitchen. I teased him the way you do when you're trying to keep things light. What, are you running a covert operation now? I laughed, bumping his shoulder. He laughed too quickly. Work's been texting nonstop, he said. I'm just trying to stay on top of things. Fair enough. Until a few days later, he added a passcode. That shouldn't be a big deal, I know. People have passcodes. People have boundaries. But Ethan had never cared before. Not once. And the weird part wasn't the code itself. It was how he did it. Quick. Secretive. Like he didn't want me to see the pattern his thumb made on the screen. When I asked, casually, like it didn't matter, he shrugged. Cyber threats, he said. You know how everything gets hacked now. He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. Still, I didn't push. Because I didn't want to be that woman. The paranoid one. The suspicious one. The one who turns normal life into an interrogation. But it didn't stop at the passcode. He started taking calls in other rooms. Not discreetly either. His phone would buzz and he'd do this thing, this tiny pause, like he was calculating whether I'd notice. Then he'd smile too bright and say, "Oh, I'll just take this quick," and disappear into the bedroom or step out to the balcony like our living room suddenly had bad reception. When I asked who it was, he'd brush it off. Just a work friend. Just a guy from my team. Just stuff. And then came the face down thing. I didn't even know that was a red flag until it happened over and over. Dinner table, coffee table, couch cushion. His phone would land face down like it couldn't risk a single word lighting up where I might see it. One night I reached toward the salt shaker and my hand went near his phone by accident. He slid it away. Fast. Too fast for someone who wasn't hiding anything. He didn't even realize what he'd done until he saw my face. Then he laughed, again too quickly, and said, "Sorry, reflex." I nodded, but something inside me went cold. Because reflexes come from fear or guilt. And then the emotional distance started. Our conversations used to be easy. Now they felt like chores we completed so the silence wouldn't swallow us whole. If I mentioned the future, our anniversary trip, maybe saving for a new car, Ethan would give a vague, "Yeah, we'll figure it out." And then he'd change the subject so cleanly, It felt like watching someone close a door in your face without slamming it. It all crystallized one afternoon when he told me he was meeting a friend for coffee. I was out running errands near that area, and honestly, I thought it would be sweet to surprise him. Like a reset, like proof we still had that spark. So I pulled into the parking lot across from the cafe, and I froze. Ethan wasn't inside. He was outside, pacing the sidewalk with his phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight, eyes hard. He didn't look like a man meeting a friend. He looked like a man finalizing something. I stayed in my car. My hands were on the steering wheel, but I couldn't feel them. I didn't mean to overhear. I didn't lean out the window. I didn't creep closer. But the wind carried pieces of his voice. Nearly set. Fresh start soon. And something else. Something that made my stomach drop, because he sounded excited. Not happy. Not relieved. Excited like someone who can taste the finish line. When he got home later, I kept my tone light. How was coffee? He didn't even blink. Oh, good, he said easily. My friend was venting about her relationship. Same old stuff. It was too smooth. Too rehearsed. Like he'd practiced it in the mirror on the drive back. I stared at him for one heartbeat longer than normal. Then he did something that felt like the real reason he'd been building all this secrecy. He brought up money. We should consolidate our finances, he said, like he was suggesting a new Netflix show. Just organize everything in one place. Accounts, passwords, documents, for emergencies. I blinked. What kind of emergencies? I asked, keeping my voice casual, but my pulse started climbing. He shrugged. You know, in case something happens. If one of us needs to make a big move fast. It's just smart. His reasoning sounded logical, but his delivery felt practiced, too perfect, like he'd been coached on which words would sound responsible instead of suspicious. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said, makes sense. But inside, my instincts were screaming so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. Why now? Why this sudden push to streamline money when we'd always been relaxed? Separate accounts, shared expenses, no drama. That night, I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, while he breathed like a man with nothing to hide. Phone secrecy. The cafe call. The distance. The money questions. It wasn't one big smoking gun. It was the way all the little things formed a pattern. A shape. And that shape looks like an exit. I told myself I'd wait. I told myself to be calm. But deep down, I already knew. Something was coming. And if I didn't prepare, I would be the last person to find out, after it was too late. The worst part about suspicion isn't the fear. It's the silence you have to live in while you decide whether you're crazy. For the next few days after Ethan's "let's consolidate everything" speech, I kept doing what women like me always do when something feels off. I tried to normalize it. I tried to be the calm one. I tried to talk myself out of my own instincts. Because if you accuse the person you love of plotting behind your back, and you're wrong, you don't just apologize. You fracture something. So I smiled. I made dinner. I laughed at the right moments. I kissed him goodnight like my stomach wasn't tied in knots. But every time his phone buzzed, my eyes flicked toward it before I could stop myself. Every time he got up and stepped into another room to take a quick call, my chest tightened like a hand closing around it. And every time he came back with that neutral expression, like nothing had happened, I felt that fog again. That distance. It wasn't just the phone anymore. It was him. Ethan had this habit when he was happy. He'd fill the room. He'd talk with his hands. He'd lean into me when I spoke, like every word mattered. Now he felt elsewhere. Like his body was here, but his mind was already packing boxes. One night, I tried to pull us back to what we were. You know, I said, flipping through vacation ideas on my phone. Our anniversary is coming up. We could finally do that weekend cabin thing. No work. Just us. He didn't even look up from the TV. Yeah, he said, flat and quick. We'll figure it out. Then he changed the channel. Just like that. It was such a small moment. No yelling, no argument. But it landed in my stomach like a stone. Because when someone is still invested, they don't respond to your future like it's an inconvenience. They respond like it matters. The next day, he brought up the finances again. Not in a dramatic way. In a casual way, like he was trying to make it feel normal. We were in the kitchen. I was slicing fruit. The knife hit the cutting board in a steady rhythm, and he was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone like he was half listening to the world. Hey, he said, now looking up. Have you thought about sorting out the bank stuff? Like, do you know where all our account info is? Passwords, statements, that kind of thing? I set the knife down slowly. My heartbeat didn't spike. It dropped. Because now it wasn't a suggestion. It was persistence. I wiped my hands on a paper towel, turned to him, and kept my voice calm on purpose. Steady, controlled, the way you talk when you're forcing yourself not to sound emotional. Okay, I said. What's going on? He paused. The smallest pause. And I watched his thumb stop moving on his phone. You've been weirdly fixated on our finances lately, I continued. Is there something we need to talk about? He looked up like I'd startled him, then laughed, again, that quick laugh that never reached his eyes. No, he said immediately. No, nothing's wrong. I think it's smart. Smart for what? I asked. He shrugged, but it wasn't a casual shrug. It was defensive, tight. I don't know. Life, emergencies, it's not a big deal, Avery, I swear. There it was. The word Avery. He only used my full name when he was trying to sound reasonable, when he was trying to guide a conversation somewhere without making it obvious. I stared at him for one more beat, letting the silence press against us. Then I nodded. Okay, I said softly. And I dropped it. Not because I believed him, because I wanted to see what he'd do next. That night, while he showered, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the bathroom door like I could hear the truth through the steam. I hated what I was becoming. I hated that I was counting red flags instead of counting blessings. But my instincts weren't quiet anymore. They were relentless. The next day, while Ethan was at work, I logged into our joint account. I didn't do it with adrenaline, like some spy movie. I did it with a sick feeling in my throat, like I was about to confirm something I didn't want to know. At first, it looked normal. Rent, utilities, groceries, the usual. Then I noticed the transfers. Not one big chunk. Small ones. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Amounts small enough that most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking. But I was looking, and when I pulled up the history for the last month, I saw the pattern. Every few days, same kind of amounts. Always going out, always to accounts I didn't recognize. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My mind tried to rush in with explanations. Maybe he was paying something off. Maybe he was helping someone. Maybe he was planning a surprise. But my stomach didn't buy any of those stories. Because if it was innocent, he would have said something. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I opened a separate folder on my laptop and saved them all there, my hands moving automatically while my thoughts spun. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to slam the laptop shut and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But that advice from years of reading other people's stories and forums, it echoed in my head. If you confront too soon, you give them time to cover their tracks. So I didn't confront him. I did something that felt safer. I called a friend from college, someone I trusted, someone who didn't gossip, someone who never got dramatic for entertainment. He was a lawyer now, and when he picked up, I forced myself to sound normal. Hey, I said, can I run something by you? Just hypothetically. He didn't laugh. He didn't brush me off. He just listened. I told him about the phone secrecy, the cafe, the money questions, the transfers. I downplayed it at first, because that's what you do when you're afraid of being told you're paranoid. I'm not saying something's definitely up, I said quickly. Something feels wrong. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, I'm not saying he's planning something, but you're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself. My throat tightened. Protect myself how? I asked. He exhaled. Look, people can be in love and still get ugly when money is involved, he said. And if your gut is telling you to pay attention, you should. Better safe than sorry. He didn't tell me to spy. He didn't tell me to do anything illegal. He outlined basic legal steps, ways to secure what was mine, ways to make sure I wasn't blindsided if things went south. As he spoke, I felt two things battling inside me. Guilt, because I still wanted to believe Ethan was good, and resolve, because the transfers didn't lie. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet living room with the TV off and the curtains half drawn, listening to the hum of the fridge like it was the only stable thing in the house. This wasn't just about money. This was about the life we built. I kept flashing back to our wedding night, his hands in mine, his voice promising we were a team. And now I was preparing like we were opponents. That night, when Ethan came home, he kissed my cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. His face was calm. His eyes were steady. He looked like a man with nothing to hide. And that was the part that terrified me most. Because either I was losing my mind, or he was hiding it perfectly. I waited until he fell asleep. Then I opened my laptop. My hands weren't shaking like a movie scene. They were steady, almost numb, like my body had decided for me. I pulled up everything. Accounts, investments, property paperwork, anything with my name attached to it. Each document I opened felt like another step away from the woman who believed love was enough. And another step toward the woman who understood love doesn't stop someone from trying to take what's yours. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to survive him. If my instincts were right, I made a list. What could be moved? What couldn't? How fast it could happen? How discreetly? I paused, staring at the cursor blinking on the screen like a heartbeat. Then I did something I didn't think I'd ever do in my life. I called my mom. It was late. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Baby, what's wrong?" I swallowed. "I need you to hold some things for me," I said, keeping it vague. "It's not bad, just a precaution." There was a pause. The kind of pause where a mother hears the truth you're trying not to say. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I lied. "I just want to be careful." She didn't push. She didn't demand details. She just said, "Of course, whatever you need." When I hung up, a wave of relief hit me so hard it almost felt like grief. Because needing your mother like that as an adult means something in your life has cracked. And I could feel the crack spreading. By the time Ethan rolled over in his sleep and mumbled something I couldn't understand, my list was complete. The plan was forming. And deep down I knew, whatever Ethan was preparing to do, I couldn't afford to be the last person to know. There's a strange clarity that comes when you accept one hard truth. No one is going to protect you better than you will. The night I decided to act didn't feel dramatic. There was no rain hitting the windows, no trembling hands hovering over the keyboard like a movie scene. It felt quiet. Too quiet. Like the calm you get right before something irreversible happens. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen cutting through the dim apartment. Ethan was out, working late, he'd said, which lately meant nothing and everything at the same time. I stared at the first account on my list. This was the money I'd built before him. Savings from my 20s. Investments I'd researched myself. The safety net I was proud of because it meant I didn't need anyone to survive. And yet here I was, wondering if the man I loved was positioning himself to take it. My lawyer friend's words echoed in my head. You don't need proof to protect yourself. You need timing. So I started with the cleanest moves. The ones that were legal, quiet, defensible. I transferred what I could, slowly, methodically, never in one big chunk. Enough movement to secure myself, but not enough to trigger alerts or questions. I left the joint account untouched, except for normal expenses. Rent still paid, groceries still bought. I wasn't trying to disappear the money. I was trying to make sure it couldn't disappear from me. As each confirmation email popped up, a dull ache settled in my chest. Not fear, not excitement, grief. Because every transfer felt like I was admitting something I wasn't ready to say out loud. That the marriage I believed in might already be over, and I was the only one still pretending otherwise. Then came the house. The paperwork sat in a neat folder I'd barely opened in years because I trusted that I didn't need to. Trust makes you lazy in the best way. It convinces you danger is always external, never sleeping beside you. I reviewed every page, every clause, every signature. And when I made the call to initiate the change, putting it under a structure tied to my mother, I had to pause halfway through the conversation just to breathe. "This is legal, right?" I asked quietly, even though I already knew the answer. "Yes," the professional on the other end said calmly. "It's been done many times before." That should have comforted me. Instead, it made me sad, because it meant my situation wasn't unique. People had stood where I was standing, felt what I was feeling, loved someone, and still needed armor. By the time I closed my laptop, my reflection in the dark screen looked different, older, sharper, like someone who just crossed an invisible line. I wasn't the woman who assumed good intentions anymore. I was the woman who prepared for bad outcomes. When Ethan came home later that night, I was already in bed. He slid in beside me, kissed my temple, and asked if I wanted to watch something tomorrow. "Sure," I said, my voice steady. He wrapped an arm around me, relaxed, comfortable, unaware. And the weight of that nearly crushed me, because part of me wanted to shake him awake and scream, "Why are you doing this?" And another part of me whispered, "Because he thinks you won't see it coming." The next few days were an exercise in acting. I laughed when I was supposed to. I asked about his work. I responded like nothing inside me was rearranging itself into something colder and stronger. Ethan, meanwhile, seemed lighter, not affectionate exactly, but relieved, like something he'd been worried about had resolved itself. And that made my skin crawl. Because people don't relax unless they think the risk has passed. What stood out most wasn't what he said. It was what he stopped saying. No more talk about finances. No more questions about documents or passwords. The topic vanished completely. At first, I wondered if he'd dropped it because I'd pushed back. Maybe he thought it wasn't worth the effort. But then I noticed the glances. Quick looks when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he'd open his mouth like he was about to say something, then stop. It felt like he was waiting. Waiting for me to bring it up. Waiting for permission. Waiting for a sign that I was still the same woman who trusted without question. I didn't give him one. That silence became my shield. Every night after he fell asleep, I checked everything again. Accounts, documents, dates, signatures. I made sure nothing could be undone on a technicality. I confirmed with my mom that she had every file, every backup. This is all just precaution, I told her again. I know, she said gently, and I'm proud of you. That was when it hit me how serious this had become. Mothers don't say they're proud when things are normal. 2 weeks passed like that. 2 weeks of eerie normalcy. Ethan cooked dinner once. He joked. He asked about my day. And for half a second, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. If I'd built a fortress against a threat that didn't exist. Then, on a random Friday evening, he asked me to sit down. He turned off the TV. He folded his hands. And before he even spoke, my stomach dropped. Because some instincts don't fade. They wait. And I knew, before he said a single word, that whatever I'd done in the shadows had just saved me from what was coming next. We need to talk. Those 4 words didn't hit me like a slap. They hit me like confirmation. Ethan sat across from me on the couch, posture straight, hands folded together the way people do when they've rehearsed something and don't want to forget their lines. The TV was off. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I nodded slowly, as if he'd just said something ordinary. Okay, I said. He took a breath that sounded measured, deliberate. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began. About us, about my life, about what I need. There it was. The language of detachment. The preamble that lets someone frame their exit as personal growth instead of abandonment. I think, he continued, eyes fixed somewhere just past my shoulder, that I need space. I feel like I've lost myself in this marriage. Marriage. Interesting how the word suddenly mattered. I stayed silent. I let him fill the space. People always tell you more when you don't interrupt. It's not that you did anything wrong, he said quickly, then contradicted himself without realizing it. It's just, I've given up a lot, and I don't think you ever really appreciated that. That one landed, not because it was true, but because of how confidently he said it. I deserve better, he added, voice cool, controlled, like he was stating a fact, not a feeling. I felt something in me harden, not anger, clarity. He wasn't sad. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't even particularly guilty. He was resolved, and that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to explain what sacrifices he meant, because I already knew the answer would be vague. People who rewrite history don't like specifics. Instead, I nodded. If that's what you want, I said evenly, we'll figure out next steps. He looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time that night. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He'd expected resistance, tears, bargaining, fear. He didn't get any of it. That night, he packed a bag and left to clear his head. By Monday morning, the papers arrived. Not a conversation, not a discussion, legal documents. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that went cold in my hands as I read through them. It wasn't just a divorce filing. It was a demand. Half the house, half my savings, my investments, the car, and a vague request for spousal support that made no sense given his income. It wasn't grief that washed over me. It was disbelief. Because this wasn't someone leaving a relationship. This was someone trying to cash it out. And suddenly, every strange moment from the last 6 months snapped into place. The secrecy, the money questions, the friend who'd been helping him see clearly. This wasn't impulsive. It was strategic. I called my lawyer that afternoon. He didn't sound surprised. Do not respond emotionally, he said. Let me handle this. So I did. And that was when the real waiting began. The kind where you don't sleep properly. Where every unknown number makes your pulse spike. Where you replay conversations and realize how carefully you were being positioned. A few days later, Ethan texted me. I hope you understand this isn't personal. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone and setting it face down on the table. Because it was personal. It was just also calculated. And the person he thought he was out maneuvering? She was already 3 steps ahead. Once the papers were filed, Ethan stopped pretending this was about feelings. Everything became transactional. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't check in. He didn't circle back with late-night nostalgia or second thoughts. What he did do was push. Through lawyers. Through timelines. Through demands dressed up as fair. That's when I knew, without a doubt, that someone else had been whispering in his ear. Because people don't suddenly learn how to squeeze a settlement out of nowhere. They're taught. The first clue came from social media. I hadn't blocked him, and he hadn't blocked me. We were still living in that strange in-between, where everything was technically polite but emotionally radioactive. I scrolled through his tagged photos, old events, work functions, Group shots I'd never looked at twice before. That's when I noticed her. Trisha. She wasn't front and center. She didn't leave heart emojis or flirty captions. She was subtle. A like here. A, you're killing it there. A comment on a post that didn't really need one. Enough to blend in. Enough to be invisible, unless you were already looking. I clicked her profile. Public. Marketing job. Mid-30s. Stylish but not flashy. The kind of woman who knows how to look harmless while planting ideas. And then I saw it. A photo she'd posted weeks earlier, standing outside a cafe. The cafe. The same one where I'd seen Ethan pacing the sidewalk, voice low, talking about a fresh start. My stomach tightened. I didn't have proof. But I had pattern recognition. And patterns don't lie. I reached out to a mutual friend, someone who'd known Ethan long before me. I kept my tone light, careful not to sound accusatory. Hey, I said. Have you talked to Ethan lately? He mentioned a friend who's been giving him advice. There was a pause on the line. Too long. I don't really want to get involved, she said quickly. I don't know anything. Then she ended the call. I tried another friend. Same approach. Same outcome. Evasiveness. Defensiveness. Like they'd all been prepped to say the same thing. Finally, I called someone I trusted less, but who valued honesty more than loyalty. She hesitated. Then she sighed. There's a woman at his work, she said quietly. Trisha. They've been spending a lot of time together. I don't know exactly what's going on, but she's been very involved. Involved how? I asked. Helping him think through the divorce, she said. What he deserves. What he should ask for. There it was. Not an affair, at least not yet. Something colder. Coaching. I didn't confront him. I didn't text. I didn't demand answers. I did something smarter. That Saturday, I parked a block away from his new apartment. I told myself I was just confirming what I already knew. That I wasn't stalking. That I wasn't spiraling. I waited. A few hours later, the door opened. Ethan stepped out. And behind him, Trisha. They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They walked close enough that their shoulders brushed. They leaned toward each other when they spoke. Comfortable. Familiar. Like teammates. They got into her car and drove off. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because now I understood everything. The distance hadn't been confusion. It had been preparation. The money questions hadn't been curiosity. They'd been reconnaissance. And the divorce? It wasn't an ending. It was supposed to be a launch. For him. For her. Funded by me. He thought I was going to panic. To plead. To negotiate from fear. He had no idea that by the time he filed, I had already closed every door he planned to walk through. The mediation room was colder than it needed to be. Not temperature-wise, emotionally. That kind of sterile cold where everything smells like recycled air and bad decisions, where people sit too straight and speak too carefully because every word might cost them money. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early. He looked confident. Not smug. Worse than that. Calm. Centered. Like a man who believed the outcome had already been decided and he was just there to collect it. Trisha wasn't there, of course. She didn't need to be. This was the part where she stayed invisible. His lawyer sat beside him with a binder thick enough to double as a weapon. He placed it on the table with a soft thud, the sound of preparation. My lawyer nodded politely. I said nothing. When the mediator signaled to begin, Ethan's lawyer jumped right in. He listed the demands like they were reasonable, even generous. Half the house, half my savings, my investment accounts, the car, and support payments to maintain a standard of living. I watched Ethan while his lawyer spoke. He didn't look at me. He stared at the table, nodding occasionally, jaw set. This wasn't emotional for him. It was procedural. When his lawyer finished, the mediator turned to us. My client has something we'd like everyone to review before we continue, my lawyer said calmly. He slid a slim stack of papers across the table. Not thick, not dramatic, just precise. Ethan's lawyer picked them up first. I watched his expression change in stages. Confusion, calculation, then something like irritation. What's this? He asked, flipping through. These documents show the transfer of all major assets into a legal trust, my lawyer said evenly, established under my client's mother's name. Ethan looked up sharply. What? He snapped. The transfers were completed weeks before the divorce filing, my lawyer continued. They are legal, notarized, and irrevocable. The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Dangerous quiet. Ethan's lawyer shot him a look. You didn't mention this, he said flatly. Ethan grabbed the papers, scanning them faster now, flipping pages like if he moved quickly enough, the reality would change. This isn't real, he muttered. This can't be real. Then he turned to me, and for the first time since this started, the mask cracked. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were furious. "You planned this," he hissed. "You knew I was filing and you set this up to ruin me." I didn't respond, because there was nothing to explain. My lawyer answered for me. "These actions were taken as a precaution," he said. "No laws were broken. No assets were concealed. Everything was done transparently and within the bounds of the law." Ethan's lawyer leaned back in his chair, lips pressed thin. "This changes things," he said. "Yes, it did." The mediator cleared her throat. "We'll need to pause," she said carefully. "Counsel will need time to review these documents." Ethan slammed the papers onto the table. "This is unbelievable," he said, voice tight. "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I finally looked at him, really looked at him. "This is what you were doing to me," I said quietly. The meeting ended shortly after that. Outside, in the hallway, Ethan grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to make a point. "This isn't over," he said under his breath. "You'll regret this." I met his eyes. "My only regret," I said, "is trusting you." And for the first time since all of this began, he looked scared. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It leaked. At first it came as calls. Missed calls, to be exact. My phone lighting up with Ethan's name at odd hours. Early morning. Late night. In between meetings. Like he was throwing darts at the clock, hoping one of them would land when my defenses were down. I didn't answer. The first voicemail was almost gentle. "Hey, can we talk?" he said, voice low, measured. "I think things got misunderstood." The second one came an hour later. "I'm not trying to fight you. I just want us to be reasonable." By the end of the day, the tone shifted. "You didn't have to do this," he snapped in the next message. "You blindsided me." I deleted them without responding. My lawyer had been clear. Silence was my strongest position. Anything I said could be twisted, reframed, or used as leverage. Ethan wasn't used to silence. By day 2, the messages swung wildly, like he was throwing emotions at me, hoping one would stick. One voicemail sounded tight, controlled, his voice rough around the edges. Not tears, not weakness, just frustration straining against pride. "I supported you," he said. "I sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay me?" Another came hours later, sharper. "You think you're some kind of genius now? All you've done is prove how selfish you really are." Then, late that night, one final message. This didn't have to be ugly. I stared at my phone after that one, because it hadn't been ugly until he realized he wasn't getting what he came for. When calls and voicemails stopped working, he switched strategies. He went public. Not publicly in a social media meltdown way, but quietly, carefully, the way people do when they're trying to control a narrative. Friends started texting me, not accusing me outright, just probing. "Hey, I heard things are rough." I didn't know Ethan was feeling so unappreciated. I guess sometimes people do drastic things when they feel cornered. Cornered. As if he were the victim. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't counter-message with screenshots or timelines. I let him talk. Because the problem with stories built on half-truths is that they collapse under basic questions. And sure enough, they did. People asked him why the divorce papers were so aggressive if this was just about space. Why the demands were so precise if it wasn't planned. Why the finances mattered so much if he only wanted freedom. The answers didn't line up, so he pivoted. The story changed again. Now it was a misunderstanding, then a wake-up call, then, unbelievably, a test. He just needed to see if Avery would fight for the marriage, someone told me, repeating his words like they made sense. A test, filed with lawyers, with demands, with deadlines. People didn't buy it, not for long. The more he talked, the worse it sounded. And then, right when the pressure was starting to close in on him, my phone buzzed with a message that changed everything. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from Tom. We weren't close. Friendly, yes. Trusted, maybe, but not someone who inserted himself into drama. "I have something you need to see," the text read. "Can we talk?" My chest tightened, not with fear, but anticipation. Because something told me this wasn't another opinion. It was evidence. We met 2 days later. And when he slid his phone across the table, I understood why Ethan's confidence had evaporated so quickly. Some lies don't just unravel. They detonate. Tom didn't say anything at first. He just slid his phone across the table and watched my face instead of the screen, like he was bracing for impact. "What am I looking at?" I asked, even though my chest had already tightened. "Read," he said quietly. "All of it." I scrolled, and with every swipe, the room felt colder. They were messages between Ethan and Trisha. Not vague, not suggestive, not open to interpretation. Strategic. Calculated. Cruel in the way people get when they stop seeing someone as a person and start seeing them as a resource. One message from Ethan read, "She's hesitating. I think she suspects something." Trisha replied, "Then you need to push the narrative harder. Make her feel guilty. Remind her what you gave up. She owes you." My throat went dry. Another message, days later. "Once the settlement's done, we'll have what we need. I just need her to sign." Trisha's response came fast. "Stay strong. Don't back down. You deserve half and more. We'll start fresh once you've got the money." I stared at the screen, my hands perfectly still. This wasn't emotional venting. This wasn't two people leaning on each other during a breakup. This was a playbook. Every strange moment, every rehearsed line, every financial question. All of it had been engineered. Tom exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to believe it at first," he said. "But Mark, sorry, a guy I know, overheard Trisha bragging about how she was helping Ethan secure his future. It didn't take long to realize what that meant." "And you got these how?" I asked, my voice distant even to my own ears. "She sent them," Tom said, "to someone she trusted, someone who started feeling sick about it. They didn't want blood on their hands." I nodded. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt emptied out, like whatever part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding had finally been excised. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked quietly. Tom shook his head. "It's not that he wanted to leave," I said. "It's that he planned to destroy me on the way out and thought I wouldn't notice." Tom looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't deserve this." I thanked him, handed the phone back, and sat there for a long moment after he left, just breathing. Then I did something I hadn't done once since this started. I let the truth move. I didn't blast it online. I didn't post screenshots with captions. I didn't need to. I shared them privately, carefully, with people who mattered, with people who had been confused, neutral, or quietly skeptical. The effect was immediate. The same friends who had told me to be reasonable stopped messaging. The ones who'd repeated Ethan's test excuse went quiet. And the people who'd stayed on the fence finally picked a side. His. Just not the one he wanted. Word spread faster than I expected. Because when people see proof, they don't need persuasion. They connect the dots themselves. Ethan's lawyer contacted mine within days. The tone had changed. No more demands, no more ultimatums, no more confidence. Just logistics. The claims were withdrawn. The aggressive language softened. The fight was over before it ever made it to court. And Trisha? She vanished. Her social media went dark. Her name stopped coming up. Her presence evaporated the moment it was clear there was no money waiting on the other side. The other hall. I wouldn't be surprised if she'd believed her own fantasy, right up until it collapsed. Ethan tried to reach me again after that. The messages weren't angry anymore. They weren't threatening. They were desperate. "Can we just talk? I made mistakes. You don't have to forgive me. I just need you to hear me out." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to hear. Some betrayals don't end in screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. They end in silence, the kind that settles when the truth has finally done its work. Tom didn't say anything at first. He just slid his phone across the table and watched my face instead of the screen, like he was bracing for impact. "What am I looking at?" I asked, even though my chest had already tightened. "Read," he said quietly. "All of it." I scrolled, and with every swipe, the room felt colder. They were messages between Ethan and Trisha. Not vague, not suggestive, not open to interpretation. Strategic. Calculated. Cruel in the way people get when they stop seeing someone as a person and start seeing them as a resource. One message from Ethan read, "She's hesitating. I think she suspects something." Trisha replied, "Then you need to push the narrative harder. Make her feel guilty. Remind her what you gave up. She owes you." My throat went dry. Another message, days later. "Once the settlement's done, we'll have what we need. I just need her to sign." Trisha's response came fast. "Stay strong. Don't back down. You deserve half and more. We'll start fresh once you've got the money." I stared at the screen, my hands perfectly still. This wasn't emotional venting. This wasn't two people leaning on each other during a breakup. This was a playbook. Every strange moment, every rehearsed line, every financial question. All of it had been engineered. Tom exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to believe it at first," he said. "But Mark, sorry, a guy I know, overheard Trisha bragging about how she was helping Ethan secure his future. It didn't take long to realize what that meant." "And you got these how?" I asked, my voice distant even to my own ears. "She sent them," Tom said, "to someone she trusted, someone who started feeling sick about it. They didn't want blood on their hands." I nodded. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt emptied out, Like whatever part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding had finally been excised. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked quietly. Tom shook his head. "It's not that he wanted to leave," I said. "It's that he planned to destroy me on the way out and thought I wouldn't notice." Tom looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't deserve this." I thanked him, handed the phone back, and sat there for a long moment after he left, just breathing. Then I did something I hadn't done once since this started. I let the truth move. I didn't blast it online. I didn't post screenshots with captions. I didn't need to. I shared them privately, carefully, with people who mattered, with people who had been confused, neutral, or quietly skeptical. The effect was immediate. The same friends who'd told me to be reasonable stopped messaging. The ones who'd repeated Ethan's test excuse went quiet, and the people who'd stayed on the fence finally picked a side. His. Just not the one he wanted. Word spread faster than I expected. Because when people see proof, they don't need persuasion. They connect the dots themselves. Ethan's lawyer contacted mine within days. The tone had changed. No more demands, no more ultimatums, no more confidence. Just logistics. The claims were withdrawn. The aggressive language softened. The fight was over before it ever made it to court. And Trisha? She vanished. Her social media went dark. Her name stopped coming up. Her presence evaporated the moment it was clear there was no money waiting on the other side. I wouldn't be surprised if she'd believed her own fantasy, right up until it collapsed. Ethan tried to reach me again after that. The messages weren't angry anymore. They weren't threatening. They were desperate. "Can we just talk? I made mistakes. You don't have to forgive me. I just need you to hear me out." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to hear. Some betrayals don't end in screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. They end in silence, the kind that settles when the truth has finally done its work.